Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. I have a lot going on in today's card video. I'm going to be using some products that I've been meaning to use for a couple of months now. First, I have this set of BetterPress plates. It's called Spring Magnolias, and it comes with the coordinating dies. Next, I have a 3D embossing folder, and this one is called Woven. These are both from the Spring Sampler collection that Simon Hurley released in February. For card number 1, I'm going to be using the Spring Magnolia plates, but I'm going to use them on my Glimmer hot foil machine. I really love that you can use these plates on your Glimmer machine as well as the BetterPress system. I'm going to go ahead and glimmer up all of the flowers. I have all of my plates on the machine heating up. I'm going to use some gold foil over these. The paper that I'm using is Spellbinders watercolor paper. I want to use the rough side, so we'll see how these foil up. But I wanted to pull out some watercolors to paint these in today. Once the timer has stopped flashing, I'll take this off camera and run it through my Platinum 6. I did allow it to stay on the Glimmer machine just a little bit longer. I was a little bit worried about this textured cardstock that I'm glimmering on. So let me peel off the foil and I'll show you how this turned out. And it turned out beautifully. I was very surprised because this is very textured watercolor cardstock. So next I'm going to use the same watercolor paper and glimmer out the sentiments. I did all 3, but this time I used the opposite side of the watercolor paper, which is smooth, and that turned out beautifully as well. I glimmered that with some black foil. I'm going to put those aside so that I can work on the background. I'm using a baby wipe to moisten another piece of the watercolor paper. This will prevent it from cracking when I run it through the Platinum 6. And I love this basket weave. It's so beautiful. And now I'm going to paint on some gold watercolors just over the basket weave. I'm painting kind of slow at this edge. I didn't want to get any above the basket weave because I'm going to paint that another color, but I just want to put on a nice layer of this gold paint. These paints are called Starry watercolors from Kuretake. I've had these for years. They have just really lasted me a long time. I'm going to add a little more water, and I end up pouring in way too much water. I wanted more pigment. So I'm going to just allow that to evaporate a little bit. I'll finish up the bottom here, but I am going to add another layer of paint after that evaporates so that I can get it just a little bit brighter. I'll set that aside to dry, and I'm going to paint in my flowers next. And this is my little tin box of Prima watercolors. It's a combination of a few different Prima sets that I just put in one tin for easy access. I'm adding some watercolor just to the bottom of the petals. After these dry, I will come in with another layer. I'm using a really small black velvet watercolor brush to do this. And the gold foiling resists the watercolors, so it's still going to be bright and pretty. But this is just a really fast and fun way to add color to the flowers. And now let's add another layer of gold to the basket weave. And then when this dries, it's just so shimmery and pretty. I'm really a big fan of Spellbinders watercolor paper. I've almost used up a whole pack, and I'm going to have to order some more. Now that my flowers are dry, I'm coming back in with a second layer. I'm taking the color all the way to the tips this time. I'm using the same pink paint, but it's just more watered down. And I'm going to go over the leaves once more with the greens. And then I can just set these aside to dry. I'm not painting them in perfectly. I'm adding shadows at the base of the petals, but I just want them to look kind of painterly and pretty. Now that my basket weave panel is dry, I'm going to add some blue at the top of this panel. And again, I'm just using my Prima watercolors. They're really inexpensive colors, but I like this little set that I have. Very bright, vibrant colors. I want the darkest blue to be at the bottom of this white section. Adding darker blue at the bottom and then just kind of blending my way up to a lighter blue. Usually when I do this, I tape the paper down. It helps it from curling up or buckling, but I didn't leave enough room for my tape. And as you can see, it did warp, but I'll show you how I'm going to get around that. To make the bottom edge of this panel look more like a basket, I'm using Spellbinders Corner Rounder. I'll chomp off just the bottom two edges, and then I'll do the same with the card base. So to attach this to the card base, I'm using a lot of glue. And again, this is watercolor paper, so it can take it. It can handle all of this moisture. And then I can attach it to the top folding card base. After I attach this, I will put something kind of heavy on top just to keep the edges down. I don't want it to be like a big dictionary or something that will flatten out the 3D embossing. I'm going to attach the flowers with some foam squares across the line where the blue meets the gold. I'm going to use every single flower that I painted, except for the first one I painted turned out a little too purple. So I am going to cut up that piece and just use portions of it. I want this to look really full and pretty. So this is where I cut up that flower. I'm going to put the smaller flower under there. These I'm just attaching flat and kind of tucking them behind flowers that I have popped up with the foam squares. And this makes a really big difference, just adding a few more leaves. The sentiment just fit perfectly in this little corner here by this leaf that's sticking out, and that's why I chose this one out of the 3 choices I had. I added some gold pearls as an embellishment, and here's the card all done. Just love that basket weave embossing. It's so much fun. For card number 2, I'm going to be using the BetterPress system. And I'm starting out with my absolute favorite ink from Spellbinders for the BetterPress. And this one is Mulberry. I find myself choosing this ink more than any of the others, even over the pinks. So this card is inspired by Therese from Last in Paper. She did a video recently on ways to use the BetterPress. She had a plate that was a sprig of leaves. She pressed it out on one side of the paper, and then she flipped the platen or the door and pressed it out again without moving the plate, just re-inking it. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm not moving the plate at all. Ran it through my Platinum 6. Let's see how this one turned out. I like how that comes off the edge of the paper. I'm going to do that with a smaller plate and do one corner first and then flip the platen again. I'm just inking up the portion that's going to be pressed into the paper. And then I can run this through my Platinum 6 again. And we have a pretty pattern here. It was really easy to do. So this paper that I'm using is the 100% cotton porcelain cardstock. And I'm going to come in with more of the mulberry ink to partially color in this panel, just corner to corner again. This mulberry ink is just beautiful. And then I'm going to pull out my colored pencils to color in all of these little magnolias. They look kind of like cherry blossoms to me. So I'm starting off with a light pink pencil, and then I need to blend this out with something. I don't have a lot of colors in this little tin box, so I'm pulling out a flesh tone, and it has kind of a pinkish hue to it. I'm blending it up the tip of the petal with a flesh tone color. The colors I'm using are pink, light peach, and then I come in with a deeper pink called Process Red to add a little more shading, the nooks and crannies of these flowers. I'm going to pull out a few greens for the leaves. And for that, I'll use chartreuse and apple green. I had to stop and sharpen some of these pencils. They come sharpened, but it's not a very long tip or a sharp tip to them. And you need a really sharp tip to get into some of these nooks and crannies. I'll start with the dark green on the leaves and then blend it out with the light green. And then I do most of this off camera because this did take a while. But I love coloring with my colored pencils, so it's not a chore for me. I just love it. And the pencils blend just beautifully on this cardstock. Okay, so let's start putting this card together. I'm using some tape runner to attach it to the card base. So in Teresa's video, she attached a little goldfish to make it look like an underwater scene. I'll have a link to her video listed in the description box. So for my card, I'm going to add a bird. I'm using the Christmas Bird Poinsettia collection from Spellbinders. I already cut it out with more of the porcelain cotton cardstock. And I'm going to have it popped up, but I'll have it look like it's sitting on one of the magnolias. I have to glue the wing on. I used more of the mulberry ink to color in some of the bird. And then I'll add some smaller foam squares behind it to pop it up. And then the sentiment I chose for this card is the one that says, "I love you," and it's just such a small sentiment. And I end up putting it up at the top right. It just seemed to fit there the best. For an embellishment, I'm using some light purple stickles, and I'll add it to the centers of each of the flowers where you can see the center of the flower. And then I'll set this aside to dry. And it has such a fun purpley sparkle to it. I think this one is my favorite of the two cards I created in this video. And a big thank you to Therese for her very inspirational video. I just have a few more flowers to add the stickles to. And then I'll show you a close-up of the card. I didn't put any embellishments on it this time. The stickles is an embellishment in and of itself, I think. It's so pretty. I'll put links in the description box to all of the products that I used in today's video. And again, this is the Spring Sampler Collection from Spellbinders. Thanks for spending some of your time with me today. I hope that you were inspired, and I hope you have a fun, crafty day. Until next time, bye.